I uncovered 5 chilling crimes hidden for over 20 years. What the experts found will terrify you. I never should have opened that door. That thought rattled in my mind, a cold whisper on the back of my neck. As I stood there, heart pounding. My evening had been normal coffee brewing and the soft buzz of my favorite podcast filling the room. Just me and my thoughts, comfortable in my small apartment. But then, the door rumbled like a trapped animal, drawing me in. A creak that was wrong. I hesitated, the chill seeping into my bones. Shadows painted the walls with movement. I could almost hear the darkness breathing. I stepped toward the sound, every instinct screaming to run. The air was thick, a heavy weight of dust and despair. I could smell the damp earth that clung to the walls, a reminder of something long buried. Whispers danced just beyond the range of understanding. I strained to hear, but all I caught were fragments. Conspiracies thrummed beneath the surface. My heart raced. A picture frame rattled on the wall. Alone in my apartment, I was suddenly not alone. I could feel the presence, an invisible force that pulsed with malice. What was happening? The flicker of the candle made the shadows writhe. I couldn't turn away. The urge to uncover whatever hid just out of sight pulled me closer. Then a book slid off the shelf, landing with a dull thud. I jumped, goosebumps crawling down my arms. My hands trembled as I reached for the doorknob, its metal cool against my skin. Every second felt like an hour, the shadows swirling, the whispers growing louder. I pushed the door open with a creak that echoed like a scream. My breath caught. The darkness beyond was suffocating, eager to pull me in. And there it was, a figure just beyond the threshold, shrouded in shadow. My heart stopped. I wanted to scream but found my voice lost in the sudden silence. The figure stepped closer, and my world narrowed to a tunnel of fear. The door slammed shut behind me. Hey! Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure loomed closer, a fabric of darkness stitched together that seemed to warp the very air around it. Heart pounding in my chest like a drum. I struggled to draw breath, the weight of dread pressing down like a leaden cloak. My instincts screamed for escape, yet my feet were rooted to the floor, entranced by whatever horror stood before me. The figure was indistinct, its features obscured, as if the darkness itself had taken shape. It felt ancient, a living memory of terror that had festered in the corners of my mind, the very thing I'd secretly hoped to uncover, but now wished I had left buried. A voice, rough and guttural, reverberated through the silence. Help find them. It was a chorus of agony and despair, each word striking me like a physical blow. I felt my throat tighten, the knowing sinking in that I was not the first to be drawn here, nor would I be the last. Eyes, or perhaps what should have been eyes, began to glow faintly in the obscurity. Suddenly, a rush of wind whipped through the darkened room, swirling around me. It was as if the very essence of dread had formed, encasing me in a cocoon of sinister whispers. The temperature dropped, and I felt the chill clawing at my skin, icy fingers reaching ever closer. Help! The voice again, sharper now, echoing in my mind like the cries of the lost. Each syllable drew me deeper into the nightmare, the shadows writhing as visions began to unfold around me. Flickering snapshots of lives snuffed out too soon. Echoes of laughter shattered by screams that lingered just out of reach. My pulse quickened, the images slashing at my sanity, among the fractured memories. A glimpse emerged, an old newspaper clipping, yellowed with age, fluttered into view. 5 missing, family disappears without a trace. The words stood out stark against the fading ink, the names sinking into me like barbed arrows. Each letter pulsed with something malign, something that beckoned me to unravel the mystery, to dive into the unknown. Just then, the shadows shifted violently, and the weight of countless eyes bore down upon me. Paralyzing fear surged as I turned to flee, but an unseen force held me in place. A piercing shriek echoed through the small space, the sound stretching the very fabric of reality. It was full of agony, of loss, of warning. My breath came quicker, desperation clawing at my throat that I in the struggle to escape. I grasped the doorknob again, this time hoping it would relinquish its grip. But it remained resolute, the door solid against my trembling hands. I spun around, disoriented, and found myself staring into the depths of those shimmering eyes, now fixed upon my very soul. Find them, the voice was now a sinister hiss, as if pushing the weight of endless darkness toward me. Something within me yearned to obey, to join the ranks of the restless. The reality of my situation struck like a thunderclap. I was about to become a part of whatever had tormented this house for decades. In that very moment, a loud crash erupted behind me as another book fell, this one heavy with age and secrets, opening as it hit the ground. To my horror, a hand, skeletal and pallid, reaches out from the pages, dragging itself toward me with agonizing slowness. The air twisted with malevolence, each second stretching excruciatingly that I couldn't move. When it looked like the specter would pull me into the maw of its abyss, the door to my apartment swung open once more. But instead of relief, the chill intensified. The figure in the shadows maintained its gaze, its presence stretching and contorting. As I stumbled backward, I realized with dread what or who was standing at the threshold. Not just one shadow, but others, more figures emerging from the gloom, all longing for release. I felt my blood turn to ice as I stumbled against a sudden realization. They were not here to help. All at once, the whisper grew into a collective wail, enveloping me in waves of despair, a shriek that harmonized with the cries of the damned. And just as I thought I would be swallowed whole, I caught sight of the paper falling. Downward once more, the words inscribed bleeding from their reality. The last headline echoed in my mind just before darkness closed in. They want what was taken. What had I unleashed? I staggered backward, my heart racing as my pulse echoed like a war drum in my ears. The spectral figures coalesced, each shadow a fragmented remnant of sorrow and rage, stretching towards me with outstretched limbs covered in the rags of despair. Their faces, if they could be called that, twisted in silent screams. Mouths agape, yet no sounds emerged, only the cacophony of anguish that reverberated around me. In that moment of desperation, time itself seemed to warp. I glanced at the newspaper clipping still paralyzed in my mind, a reminder of a horror that transcended time and understanding. The air thickened, an oppressive fog of guilt and unprocessed grief washing over me, threatening to engulf me. It felt like I was standing on the precipice of a chasm that would swallow the very essence of my being. Find them, they whispered in inhuman unison, the sound pulling at my soul like a predator reeling in its prey. One figure, more corporeal than the others, stepped forward, a gaunt presence with sunken features that hinted at a former life, long extinguished. Its eyes, dim yet somehow filled with tragedy, bore into me with an urgency that rendered my breath shallow. Suddenly, chaos erupted. The skeletal hand that had lurched from the ground now grasped furiously at the shadows, dragging itself forward with desperation. It was as if they all sought a release from the torment that shackled them to this realm, a release they believed I could somehow provide. I stumbled back, feeling a cold breeze encircle me, the shadows lengthening like fingers creeping along my skin. My senses flared, each whisper brushing against my mind as they wrestled for dominance. Save us. Let us go. Find what was taken. The demands blended into a symphony of torment, threatening to imprison my very thoughts. Beside me, a mirror emerged from the wall, its surface misty and turbulent, as if tumultuous seas churned beneath. I leaned closer, entranced. The glass rippled, revealing the remnants of a family's laughter, small children playing in a field, their bodies warmed by sunlight. But in an instant, darkness eclipsed their joy, screams echoing back in twisted satisfaction, their innocence ripped away. I recoiled in horror as the glass distorted, their faces morphing into terror-stricken visages, mouths opening to shriek their warnings, that I stumbled again, knocking into a small table that reverberated with a dull thud. A relic from a time forgotten slid across its surface, a tiny, rusted key. The metallic surface gleamed in the pallid light, a stark contrast to the encroaching shadows. Could this be the key to liberation or another hook into the abyss? As I reached for it, a gust of wind surged into the room, slamming the door shut with terrifying finality. The darkness inhabited the closed space, pressing against me like an invisible weight. The figures now undulated violently, their hands clawing at the air, now transformed from pleading to fury. I felt the very fabric of sanity unraveling, reality bending to the will of something ancient and vengeful. "Your soul will bind us," the gaunt figure screeched, its arms outstretched as if to tether me to their fate. I turned, adrenaline surging as I raced for the window, but it shattered before me, splintering into 1,000 shards that gleamed like teeth set to consume. The shadows rippled and morphed in response, faster now, furious and determined. Before I reached the opening, an unseen force yanked me back, pulling me into the fray. I landed hard on the floor, staring upwards as the gaunt figure now hovered inches from my face. Its grotesque features distorted into a puppet of something far worse than death as I lay there, paralyzed by fear and helplessness. I saw at the newspaper that had been the trigger of this nightmare began to change right before my eyes. The headline morphed fluidly into something more intimate, more personal. It read, "Davy found you in the maddening clamor." I struggled to scream, my voice swallowed by the encroaching darkness. I was no longer an observer. I was a prisoner, and they had begun to close in, hungry for whatever piece of me they had come to reclaim. Just as the shadowed hands grasped toward me, wrenching me into their depths of despair, a single, powerful thought shattered through the chaos. What was it that was taking my life, my sanity, or something far worse? The darkness surged, and I felt the cold tendrils wrap around me, as the world around me dimmed to a whisper of despair. Then, without warning, a cry pierced through the air, hanging suspended in time. "Help me!" The voice was a child's, and it felt like I was being pulled under, no escape in sight, as the chilling realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave. It wasn't only the shadows seeking release. I was part of this legacy of horror, and I was tethered to something far darker than I could comprehend. Whatever haunted this place was far from finished. The cry echoed again, threading through the suffocating darkness like a lifeline thrown in tumultuous seas. I strained against the tendrils that slithered around my limbs, wrenching my body back towards the gaunt figure, its eyes now gleaming with an unsettling fervor, as if my struggle only pleased it further. The spectral chorus fell silent, each punishing whisper stilled in anticipation. "Help me!" The child's voice cried again, clearer now, awakening a primordial instinct buried deep within me. What was calling to me? The spectral figures stirred, their movements coalescing into something more than mere shadows. They morphed into a tapestry of anguish intertwined with desperation. I felt their energy shift, their outstretched hands beckoning not just for a release from torment, but for an answer to a question that gnawed at the edges of their ethereal existence. I had to find the child. I forced myself to look away from the figure dangling before me, its gaunt frame oscillating with menace. My attention darted toward the shattered remnants of the window, shards now scattered across the floor like frozen rain. I pushed through a pang of dread and crawled toward the remnants of the light outside, an unseen force pulling at my legs, urging me back into the overwhelming dark. "Please!" the voice pleaded again, its pitch catching on despair, igniting a fire of determination within me. "They won't let me go." There was a spark of clarity amidst the chaos. Maybe this was the way to unravel the mystery. Perhaps this journey was not just about confronting the shadows, but unearthing the innocence they had stolen. I forced my hands to unclench, my fingers finally wrapping around the cold, rusted key that still lay on the table. The moment I gripped it, a violent tremor rippled through the room, a warning that sliced through my determination like a blade. The dark presence surged forward, the air thick with its unyielding wrath. Christian, that was the little girl's name. A whisper emanated from somewhere deep in my memory, infused with an electric urgency. She was the one tied to this haunted space. Her laughter trapped here long ago, maybe even her pain still lingering just beyond reach. That I searched for the strength to rise, but the shadow of despair clung to me cold, relentless, and suffocating. I steadied myself, forcing every ounce of will to break free as I ventured toward the remnants of light outside. "Show me where you are," I shouted into the howling void, trembling as the darkness writhed with rage at my defiance. To my astonishment, the air shimmered, and suddenly the room filled with blinding light. I squinted against the brightness, an ethereal beam cutting through the oppressive veil. In that moment, the faces of the tortured shadows transformed, flickering like dying embers. They shifted from rage to longing, their mouths no longer silent. Instead, they recited a haunting chant that crescendoed with the urgency of a funeral dirge. "Find her," they whispered, their voices layered like a discordant symphony, rising to a terrible pitch. "Her cry is the key. Find her." The bright light pulsated, revealing a doorway emerging against the wall, faintly illuminated and seemingly woven from strands of the childish voice. An otherworldly echo beckoned me, but the shadows clawed at me with a ferocity that shattered my resolve. "Don't!" the gaunt figure screamed, its face contorted in fury, summoning a vortex of darkness that swirled around me as I faltered. I could feel the psychic weight of their fury urging me to succumb, to surrender my spirit to the abyss that craved my soul. "No!" I screamed back, thrusting the key forward as if it were a sword, its metal glimmering defiantly. "I will not yield. I will find her." Just as I charged toward the doorway, the energy shifted, and a violent force erupted from the shadows. A piercing scream shook the foundation beneath me. My heart raced as I felt a frigid grip wrap around my ankle, dragging me backward into a whirlwind of dark energy that threatened to pull me under. The last thing I saw, before losing my footing, was the emergence of the child, her terrified face morphing into one of sheer horror. "Help me," she mouthed silently, reaching out with longing arms, her bright eyes now pools of despair, and as the darkness enveloped me, my last coherent thought screamed one undeniable truth. I had to confront whatever evil had taken her, no matter the cost. Because if I faltered, if I fell into oblivion, not only would I lose myself, but I would lose her forever. "Help me," echoed one last time in my mind, not a plea, but a curse. Then, everything imploded into blackness. The void swallowed me whole, an endless chasm of despair that pressed against my lungs and filled my ears with a deafening silence. I flailed against the darkness, desperate to feel anything but this oppressive weight threatening to crush me into nothingness. My heartbeat echoed in this abyss, each thrum matching the pulse of ancient malice swirling around me. Suddenly, I felt a jolt. A harsh wind swept through the void, lifting me from my fall. I erupted into a new world, landing hard against cold, damp earth. The air was thick with decay, a rancid odor that made my stomach churn. I clutched my hands into the mud, the grimy texture grounding me just enough to create a flicker of hope. In the bleakness, I caught the shadows of twisted trees looming in the distance, their skeletal branches clawing at the ashy sky. As I pushed myself to my feet, panic surged within me. Was this the underbelly of the realm I had just momentarily escaped? The oppressive silence returned, gliding around me like a thick fog, yet there were murmurs, faint whispers that seemed to pulsate from the ground itself. Each syllable was drenched in grief, the atmosphere pregnant with stories of terror waiting to be unveiled. I staggered forward, feeling a magnetic force pull me deeper into the forest of despair. The trees tightened their grip around me, as if warning against the intrusion of my fragile existence. I pressed on, the whispers growing louder, forming fragmented sentences that crawled through my mind like vermin searching for warmth. "Help her before they take her. Too late, it has begun." The echo of the child's cries formed a clearer path, intensifying with every step I took. Desperation clawed at my chest when a sudden cold enveloped me, wrapping around my heart like a noose. The darkness was sentient, hungry for my fears and regrets. As I walked, each footstep came accompanied by the unease of knowing I was not alone. Then I saw it, a faint glimmer of light flickering through the dense trees like a lone star in a stormy sky. Instinctively, I rushed toward it, driven by a primal urge to find Christian. With each hurried pace, the screams of 1,000 lost souls wrapped around my legs, pulling me back, imploring me to stop. No, I howled, throwing my head back as I fought the unseen chains binding me. I will save her. Eventually, I reached a clearing. The light, now more substantial, unfolded into a spectral scene, a reflection of a child's bedroom, eerily pristine amidst the decay of the surrounding forest. The walls were painted a soft pastel pink, adorned with illustrations of whimsical creatures frozen in time. In the center stood a small wooden bed, perfectly made, but the sheets were suffused with an ominous aura. But where was she? Christian. I called into the cacophony of whispers, desperation tinging my voice, ricocheting off the memories lingering in the air. I stepped closer, the warmth of nostalgia tinged with dread. The room felt alive, pulsing as if it were holding its breath in anticipation. And then I saw it, a shadow darting across the window, a fleeting movement that sent a shiver down my spine. I turned, heart racing, as a dark mist poured in through the gaps, enveloping me in frigid panic. The whispers grew frantic, shuddering with agony as they clawed at my sanity. Run, they urged, their tone a haunting hymn that twisted through the air. Run before it wakes. A shadowy figure emerged from the mist, coiling towards me with a grotesque grace. It was not gaunt nor lifeless, but pulsed with an unholy vitality, reshaping its form with each heartbeat. My breath hitched in my throat as its eyes glowed, twin pits of despair that seemed to absorb every ounce of light. I glanced back at the sanctuary of the child's room, sensing a horrible truth coiling in my gut. The bed, the shadows, they were not mere remnants of innocence. They were the tomb, the prison for something nightmarish, and Christian was trapped within. Help me! I heard her voice call again, but it was different this time, infused with dread and urgency, rippling through the ether, towards me like a severed thread seeking a return to its frayed edges. Christian! I cried out again, clenching my fists against the encroaching dark, feeling my sanity fracture. No! The figure roared, its body contorting in rage. The shadows exploded outward like a wave, sweeping over the clearing, their lethargy replaced by an insatiable wrath. My pulse raced as I twisted, searching for a way to escape. But as the tendrils reached for me, I finally understood I wasn't just looking for Christian. I was destined to confront this darkness. And as the sound of a child's laughter dissipated into a scream, I trembled at the knowledge that I may not be ready for what lay beyond that threshold. And as the shadows converged, I realized I had only stepped deeper into their world. The last whisper echoed in my mind, a haunting chant that sent a chill down my spine. Find her before it's too late. Then the shadows surged, and I was engulfed in a tempest of terror. The tempest swirled around me, a cacophony of screams and laughter entwined, a hideous symphony of the damned. With every breath, the rancid air pressed tighter against my chest, threatening to smother me within the relentless grasp of the shadows. They deemed me an intruder, a blight upon their domain, and their wrath roared in response. I could hear them now, the lost souls' voices melding in a grotesque dirge, singing tales of despair as I stumbled through the suffocating darkness. It felt as if the forest itself was alive, shifting and reshaping to imprison me in its embrace. Every tree seemed to reach for me, their gnarled branches grasping like skeletal fingers longing for warmth. Run! A voice, sharper and clearer than the others, sliced through the cacophony. It resonated inside my mind, echoing like the crack of thunder amidst the storm. The shadows pressed closer, whispering threats and warnings that suffocated every ounce of hope I clung to. Despair clawed at my heart as I felt the cold breath of what hunted me brushing against my skin. I had only a moment's grace before the figure surged forward, shape shifting from shadow into something more solid, something grotesquely familiar. Its form twisted and morphed as if it were crafted from every fear lodged in the deepest crevices of my soul. It was the essence of all that was wrong, a collective manifestation of regret threaded with the stench of unrelenting malice. Help me! The voice that left its lips was none other than Christian's, yet drained and horrifying, layered over with the cries of countless others. Help me before it's too late. I didn't hesitate. Stripped of all rational thought, I lunged towards the ghostly bed that beckoned with an eerie allure. I could feel the weight of the darkness wanting to drag me down, but it also felt like a tether, an invisible string that connected me to her. Over and over the name echoed Christian. Christian, each utterance fortifying my resolve. Enough! The creature let out a cry that reverberated through the clearing. The sound cracked like ice, a broken promise that thundered through me as I reached the bed. My fingers brushed against the frayed edges of the sheets, and suddenly, a shocking revelation hit me like a thunderbolt. The bed wasn't just a bed. It was a portal, an entrance to a cavernous void where Christian was imprisoned. I could feel her presence beneath the covers, her warmth fighting against the encroaching chill of whatever cursed essence trapped her. The whispers grew frantic, swirling around me as the shadows howled in fury, desperate to break my concentration. The dark figure drew ever closer, its body twisting in unnatural angles, as if stunted by its insatiable desire to consume the light. I reached for the blanket, nails digging into the threads as I pulled, the whispers rising in a furious crescendo. Don't! It was the figure, its voice writhing through the air, a dark hymn rippling with despair. She's not what you think. I hesitated, the air quaking with unseen dread. The truth felt tantalizingly out of reach, but I could hear her. Christiana's cries weaving through the chaotic noise. Help me. Please. Panic surged again, feeding on my indecision. I had to take that leap. I had to free her. I tore the blanket away and was met with an empty space, a hollow silence where warmth should have echoed. The bed was nothing but a cruel mockery, an illusory curse that had led me astray. From within the darkness, countless eyes glimmered, each pair absorbing the very light I sought. The figure surged forward, its grotesque face twisted into a sneer. You've made a grave mistake. It hissed, its voice no longer a mere echo but a resonance in the marrow of my bones. My heart raced as I felt the shadows consuming my courage, dragging me further into their depths. Christian, I cried out one final time, desperation igniting in my chest like a wildfire. And then she answered, but her voice was different now, the innocence replaced by something tainted and dreadful. Help me. But you shouldn't have freed the light. The ground beneath me trembled, and I realized the shadows were not merely dark but woven with a malefic power that fed off my fear, rotting the roots of sanity. The realization struck me there was no light to save, only a ravenous void eager to drag us both down. As I turned to flee, the figure lunged forward, its shadow stretching to engulf me in an endless void of despair. I stumbled back, the shrieks of the damned swirling violently in the air. A brutal tug on my very essence pulled me back into its embrace, the air thickening like an icy hand grasping at my soul. And then, I was falling through that endless chasm once more, but this time, I felt the cold warmth of fingers brushing against mine, dragging me under. I knew then, with a bone-deep certainty, that I was not the one saving Christian. It was she who would save me, fueled by a primal instinct. I screamed her name just as the darkness swallowed me, leaving only the echo of a childish laughter ringing in the chambers of my mind. The last flicker of light diminished as I plummeted into an abyss darker than the deepest ocean, the shadows roaring above me in triumph. And then silence. When I opened my eyes, it was not to the comforting embrace of reality, but to the sickening sensation of being suspended mid-air, enveloped in something far more insidious than the darkness I had just escaped. I fell a moment longer than gravity's pull would allow, until I struck the ground. It was a dirt floor, clammy and foul, the stench of decay clawing at my throat. I knew instantly that I was trapped in a new kind of nightmare. The thought clouded my mind. Where is Christian? Panic surged like a rising tide, stretching beyond the edges of comprehension. I braced myself, flipping onto my back and gasping for air as if every breath was being wrested from the tangled roots below. It felt like the earth itself was hungering for my despair. The shadows around me pulsated almost rhythmically, as if they were sentient, becoming aware of my return. Their presence permeated the darkness, tapping into the remnants of my fear. They coiled along the walls, surging and retreating like a malevolent sea, each contraction whispering promises of secrets yet to unfold. Christian, I shouted into the vastness, my voice swallowed whole, lost amidst echoes of long-forgotten wails. As I steadied myself, I felt the moist earth tighten beneath me, coiling like serpents around my ankles. I forced myself to stand, trembling at the very thought of what might be lurking in the shadows. That small, insistent voice, a remnant of the innocent girl I had known, had been twisted into something sinister. The transformation sent a shiver down my spine. Help me, but you shouldn't have freed the light. What had she meant? Was she in grave danger, or was she something worse? A puppet of the horrors I had freed in my desperation. I took a wobbly step forward, feeling the earth shift beneath my feet, pulsating as if alive. The floor was littered with scraps of fabric and shards of glass, glimmering in the fragments of light that broke through filmy patches of mist hovering above. I wondered momentarily if it was the remnants of Christiane's tortured past or something altogether more ghastly. A scuttling sound echoed nearby, followed by a chorus of shrill giggles, a sound all too eerily familiar. I froze, heart racing, recalling the childlike laughter that had wrapped around me like chains. The shadows writhed in response, as if they possessed a mind of their own, eager for the hunt. That I edged sideways, careful not to make any noise, but the darkness had ears and it drew nearer. Murmurs drifted through the air like a foul perfume, growing louder until words framed themselves in noxious tangents. Yes, here. Yes, come to play. The voices twined around me, entwined with dread, heightening the atmosphere of deception. Join us, forever. They beckoned, shimmering through the mist like phantoms of a lost childhood. Against my better judgment, I turned and ran into the folds of the smothering blackness. The laughter intensified, morphing into a maniacal cacophony that resonated off the walls and enveloped me entirely. The tendrils of shadow clawed at my back, eager to reclaim my essence, their touch freezing my resolve. Suddenly, the laughter stopped, replaced by a mournful wail, one that sliced through my soul like a jagged blade. Help me, don't let them take me. It was Christiane's voice again, tainted by fear and desperation. The primal instincts that surged in me responded almost automatically as I followed the sound, keenly aware that the darkness was closing in around me. Through the haze, I stumbled, nearly slipping on the wet leaves slipping beneath my feet. In the silence that followed, the shadows seemed to retreat momentarily, as if holding their breath, ominously waiting for my next move. I broke through a wall of brambles into a clearing. The air was inexplicably cooler here, tinged with the scent of earth and something sweetly decayed. At the center stood a small, decrepit structure, a child's playhouse, warped and twisted, its once bright colors now pallid and peeling. The door swayed gently on its hinges, beckoning like a siren of old. Christian, I called, racing towards it, dread tightening around my throat. The atmosphere shifted, the shadows gathering once more in a heartbeat. I'm here. As I stepped inside, a chill cascaded down my spine, every hair on my body standing at attention. The walls were plastered with more broken glass, but within the fragments, something shimmered, a reflection of a faded moment of laughter, a joyous memory swallowed by darkness. And then, the door slammed shut, a shriek erupted, flooding the space like a storm surge, and suddenly, a multitude of figures emerged from the wall's children, their faces painted in grotesque expressions, twisted with sorrow and rage. Their eyes glimmered with the glow of 1,000 unheard cries for help, each echoing the torment I had inadvertently unleashed. Now you will play, they screeched as the shadows coalesced, forming into masses of twisting darkness, threatening to consume the remnants of my fading hope. A cacophony of laughter erupted once more, this time drowning me in collective madness, and a figure broke through, stepping into the light. That it was Christia. Except she was not quite herself. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly hue, a hollow brightness that belied the innocent girl I had known. She grinned, but it was not a smile of recognition. It was the predatory glare of something unspeakably dark. Welcome home, she sang, the shadows engulfing her as she took a step closer, revealing the truth behind her words. Christian, I gasped, dread pooling in my stomach as the laughter morphed into a sinister hymn. And then, as her form began to twist like the shadows around her, I understood with a gut-wrenching clarity. This was not a reunion. It was a funeral for every hope I'd ever held. As the shadows descended upon me, I felt the walls of the playhouse closing in, crushing me beneath the weight of forgotten dreams and the lives stolen away. The last flame of resistance flickered in my heart, and I knew with a marrow-deep fear that escape was no longer an option. Yet in that moment of despair, something flickered in the corner of my eye, a glimmer, a pulse of light deep within the masses of darkness. If I could just reach it. But the figures surged forth, their wails melding into the air like a noxious fog, their cries warning me of the fate I was about to embrace. "Help us, or join us forever," they screeched, and just as I felt their icy fingers brushing against my skin, the light vanished, swallowed by the overwhelming shadows, and then a single ear-shattering scream erupted, echoing through the oppressive silence. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't just Christiana's fate hanging in the balance. It was my own. The darkness surged forward, an avalanche of despair, and I could not tell if I was the savior or the latest victim in their insatiable game. The ground trembled beneath my feet as I fought against the encroaching tide of darkness. The figures lunged at me, reaching out with fingers that twisted and elongated like sinewy vines, their voices blending into an unholy symphony that threatened to tear apart my sanity. "Join us! Be one with the shadows!" they cried, each syllable a jagged stab of dread driving deeper into my mind. I stumbled backwards, the walls of the playhouse pressing in closer, suffocating in their grotesque embrace. Shadows slithered around me, curling and weaving like snakes eager to constrict around their prey. I could feel icy tendrils grazing my skin, whispers of despair slithering into my ear, taunting me with the memories of lost joy, of laughter now twisted into a cruel joke. And then her voice, beautiful and haunting, like a dirge beneath the screams, "Help, we are so lost." It was Christiane's voice, but it mingled with the cacophony of the shadows, creating a discordant harmony that made my heart lurch. "Christiane," I shouted, torn between the pull of her familiar plea and the horror she had transformed into. Forcing myself forward, I reached out, desperate to bridge the distance between the girl I once knew and the monstrous figure she had become. "I won't abandon you," but the darkness rippled, seizing my arm, pulling me back, clenching like a vice around my throat. "You can't save her. You never could," they hissed, their eyes narrowing into slits, glimmers of unearthly light departing from their hollow pupils. Choking on fear, I looked to Christiane once more, and what I saw shattered any ember of hope within me. Her once innocently radiant eyes now glowed with an unholy fire, the remnants of her former self buried deep beneath layers of anguish and rage. "You freed the light," she said, her voice now an echo distorted by echoes of agony. "Now you must pay the price." Suddenly, the air thickened around me, swirling with palpable malice. The children, once innocent, now twisted parodies of themselves, advanced with a collective hunger, a swarm of vengeful spirits intent on dragging me into their eternal night. I fought against their grasp, thrashing wildly, but it only made their grip tighten around me, their laughter ramping up into a frenzy that scraped at the edges of my mind. At in that moment, something deep and primal surged within me, a pulsing heartbeat of defiance, as if refusing to succumb to the terror. "You won't take me," I screamed, channeling an inner rage never before invoked. Drawing upon the strength of every person I had ever loved, every ounce of light I had allowed to guide me, I pushed against the darkness until a spark burst forth, momentarily illuminating the suffocating shadows. The wailing of the children halted, the startled figures momentarily backing away as if the light had burned them. In their surprise, a path opened before me, a sliver of shadow whose light was a vivid contrast to the surrounding darkness. It flickered enticingly, and I couldn't afford to hesitate. I lunged, abandoning reason for the chance at escape. The shadows howled, their rage spilling out like a tidal wave. "You won't escape our game. You can't run from the truth." My heart raced, fear thrumming through my veins as I dashed towards the light. But just as the warmth began to envelop me, a shriek sliced through the air, deep and reverberating, channeling decades of anguish. In the chaos, I turned to see Christiane poised at the threshold of the shadows, her face shifting between torment and malevolence. a marionette caught in the grip of unseen hands. "Help me!" she cried, one last flickering moment of clarity. I faltered, conflicted as the call of childhood innocence anchored my resolve, urging me to run back to her, to embrace her, to save the last remnant of light. But the darkness surged back, suffocating her voice beneath howls of laughter and feral whispers, drowning my resolve in an abyss of despair. I could only watch as the shadows wrapped around her form, willing her deeper into their wretched embrace. "Christian!" I screamed, but it was too late. The child that once held my heart was lost. Devoured by the very darkness I had unwittingly unleashed, I pressed forward. Into the light, teeth gritted, breathing hard, a fierce determination igniting within me. The moment I breached that divide, I would find a way to fight back, to uncover the truth of this nightmare, not just for myself but for all those they had taken. But just as I reached the glimmering edge, something collided with me from behind a cold force, slimy and strong, dragging me suddenly back into the suffocating dark. I felt fingers wrap around my throat, squeezing, and everything went black as the world spiraled away. The last thing I heard was a voice not Christian's but 1,000 twisted whispers chanting in unison. "You are one of us now. You will never escape the dark." And then, a horrifying silence fell, the kind that bore witness to a soul lost. And I understood horrifically. I was not just trapped. I was now entwined in a narrative much larger than myself, woven into its very fabric as a new pawn in their dreadful game. The shadows surged forward, and as I slipped into the void, the promises of forgotten lives echoed in my mind, a new horror waiting to unfold. A truth yet to be uncovered in the chilling grasp of despair. They say you don't remember the moment you die. It's just an abrupt end, a flicker snuffed out. Yet, as consciousness returned, I found that was a lie. I was painfully aware, suspended in darkness, every nerve ending on fire with pain, confusion, and overwhelming dread. I gasped as air filled my lungs. It felt surreal, yet familiar, like waking from a nightmare only to find you're still trapped inside it. The darkness enveloped me, a shroud that coiled around my body, squeezing out any lingering hope. I was neither here nor there, lost in some liminal space between the living and the damned, a fragile puppet dangling by threads spun from regret. With a shudder, the shadows around me pulsated, a quickening heartbeat echoing through the opaque void. The air grew thick, cloying my breath as if infused with a bitterness of unspoken sins. I strained to listen, to discern any sound that would guide me back from this abyss. But all that responded was silence, punctuated only by the low, menacing rumble of shadows shifting. A flicker caught my attention, a dull light struggling against the suffocating dark, faint yet persistent. I instinctively reached towards it, drawn like a moth flitting foolishly close to a flame. But as my fingers grasped its ephemeral edge, the light flared, illuminating swathes of twisted, grotesque shapes, specters hanging in the air like marionettes caught in a storm. The figures took form, their features morphing between anguish and unbridled fury. Their mouths contorted into a silent scream, hands stretched towards me with infinite longing. I felt my heart lurch, a primal instinct gripping my chest, the urge to recoil from their tortured expressions. The empty hollowness of their eyes that spoke volumes of betrayal and pain. That I recoiled, my back hitting the cold, hard ground, though I had no idea how I had gotten here. Visions swam across my mind as children laughing in sunlight, the echo of their joy twisted into cries that struck like a hammer. Memories flooded me, Christian's face, blinking, smiling, before darkness swallowed it whole, and I felt the weight of my failure crash upon my shoulders like a tidal wave. Suddenly, a voice crept through the shadows, a whisper that was both alien and achingly familiar. "You should have run while you could, yet you chose to linger, to peep behind the curtain." It was low, seductive, wrapping around my senses like ivy around stone. "Now you are ours to keep forever." I recognized that voice. It belonged to Margaret, the girl who had disappeared many moons ago, whose faded picture still clung like a haunting prayer in the local archives. Her fate had been buried beneath the weight of years, just like the others, the whispers of their souls lost beneath the churning waves of despair. I had come here hoping to rescue them, but what power did I wield against this ancient malevolence? "Margaret!" I cried into the void, desperation bubbling to the surface. What happened to you? To all of you? The shadows writhed, and with a gesture that defied reality, they conjured images before me, flashes of chilling crimes suffused with potent terror. I glimpsed them. The children, once vibrant with laughter, now prowling, haunted remnants of joy, their spirits tethered to the darkened earth, serving penance in a realm crafted from their stolen lives. Do you see? Margaret's voice quivered, her form wavering within the shadows. Do you see how deep the roots of this horror go? They used us, tricked everyone into silence. You thought you could unveil the truth, but the truth is a web spun from lies you began to unravel long before you ever stepped foot in the playhouse. An icy claw of realization coiled around my heart. This was not merely a haunting, it was a collective scream born from betrayal. Those who had endured endless suffering were locked in their own hell, waiting for someone bold enough to disrupt that cycle and condemn another soul to their fate. My surroundings blurred and shifted like smoke, the urge to escape clawing at me. Please, there's got to be a way to save you, to save us, I shouted, desperate for a glimmer of hope amidst the shadow's suffocating embrace. But as I clawed my way back, the dark shadows recoiled momentarily, granting me breath. In that moment of reprieve, I realized the desperation wasn't just mine, it belonged to the trapped souls, fusioning their memories into my own overwhelming regret. You can't take another, I shouted. I won't be another victim. A cacophony of laughter reverberated in response, waves crashing against my sanity as the figures advanced once again, binding me to visions of despair. Join us. The light is eternal in the embrace of darkness. You are chosen. Your body, your mind will feed the void. They surged forward, a hive of spectral rage, mouths agape in ethereal cries. The shadows surged forth, tightening their grip around me. An illusion of escape slipped away, and panic spiked in my veins. I felt myself being pulled deeper, darker. The end of my resistance was nearing, and as the world spun violently back into the abyss, I caught a glimpse of the truth. Suffocating, undeniable horror where despair festered and flourished, and among their screams and howls, amidst the endless chaos, a chilling truth echoed clearer than any nightmare. The horrors that haunted this playhouse were haunting me, intertwining our fates forever. As I succumbed to the shadow's pull, I felt fingers brush my skin, a sensation of cold terror sparking my very being. Who would stand between the darkness and me? With the last shred of clarity clinging to my thoughts, I screamed into the void, "Let me go!" But the universe had other plans, for in this world where shadows reigned, the last echo of my words morphed into a final truth. I was not the first to uncover the crimes buried within this darkness, and I wouldn't be the last. The darkness folded in upon itself, suffocating me until the air grew thick with despair. The whispers rose to a fever pitch, a chilling cacophony of souls lost to oblivion, their wails piercing the heavy air like daggers aimed directly at my sanity. I had ventured into this nightmare in search of Christian, unknowingly stepping into a web of torturous existence woven from the very essence of those who had come before me. It was the cursed ground that demanded a sacrifice. But within that suffocating gloom, a voice echoed louder than the rest, wrapping around my consciousness as if it were a vine coiling tight around my throat. Help before the darkness consumes you. It was Christiane's voice, no longer sweet but laced with the anguish of countless lost children. I could hear her cries clearer now, pressing against my heart like frantic hands trying to escape. "Where are you?" I screamed, rage and sorrow intertwining in a tempest of desperation. "I will find you." Perhaps it was my defiance, perhaps the lingering flicker of light that still thrummed in my chest. But the shadows recoiled momentarily, and a vision flickered into existence, a room, bright and warm, filled with laughter, and then, in an instant, the laughter turned to cries. My heart sank as images flared before me, dark memories rolling like a wave of family. A happy girl, a house filled with joy morphing into chaos. They took us, the voices chanted together, echoing the pain of what had transpired. They took her. By now, the shadows clawed at me, piercing my skin with icy fingers as they beckoned endlessly, begging me to give in, to join their never-ending chorus of the damned. I stumbled backward, catching my breath, desperate to remember. Christian. pleaded. What did they take from you? The shadows recoiled, and then there she was, stepping forth from the mass of darkness. But it wasn't the Christian I remembered. Her eyes glowed with an ethereal light, an invasion of color against the blackness. Yet the shimmer pulled me in, craving my very soul. You should have stayed away, she hissed, but behind the insidious glow, I saw the flicker of the child I once knew. Buried deep within the shadows, her once familiar voice, escaping lips twisted into a cruel smile. Now you are part of this forever. Fear clawed at my throat as I recoiled, stealing glances at the surging darkness behind her, growing more and more ominous. It pressed closer, eager to engulf my every remaining shred of hope. Shadows danced around Christian. I felt the longing in her once joyous spirit as it melded with the darkness. Locked in a battle with the inescapable truth, the light she once had was but a flicker now. Threatened by the shadows that craved beyond measure, they were gaining ground. I could feel myself faltering beneath their sinister embrace, the heaviness reminding me too well of despair. Help us save her, echoed the chorus of lost souls, each whisper an abyss laced with sorrow, pulling me deeper into their trance. I'm here, I cried out, my voice raw with anguish. I will free you. But with each word, they surged forth, clawing at my mind, wrapping tendrils of darkness around my thoughts. You cannot save anyone, they tortured back at me, their laughter melding into pitiful wails. In that moment of torment, time seemed to slow, memories flashed like lightning in a storm, news articles, notifications, and police reports of vanishings, whispers of legends cursed. It was all unfolding. What had begun as mere curiosity now twisted into something layered and grotesque. Each name twisted deeper into me, barbs of recognition stabbing my consciousness. 5 vanished without a trace. The realization struck me like thunder. I was not hunting a single ghost. I had entered the realm of their pain, and darkness had begun to feed on my torment. I turned back to Christian, fighting to break through her shell of shadow. This isn't you, I yelled, desperation clawing at my heart. You are my light. Suddenly, the darkness erupted as if my words had ignited a fire. Shadows convulsed around me, forming grotesque shapes of children lost, their cries echoing together. She is not your light anymore. In that dreadful moment, a horrific truth unfurled before me. The darkness would never let her go. Her soul had already intertwined with the shadows, her laughter forever silenced beneath their cries. That I collapsed as the shadows surged, ready to consume me completely, drawing me into the endless abyss their realm had become. You must join us, the masses whispered, now more urgent, binding me with their strength. The cold wrapping thoroughly around my resolve as consciousness slipped from my grasp. I reached out toward the light fading behind me. No, no, I screamed, the terrifying understanding washing over me. Though I sought to save her, it was I who would be bound within this hell. In that last moment, the abyss plunged me deeper into darkness where hope is long extinguished. There, beneath the weight of history, a final revelation broke through. In the haunting silence that followed, only a single thought echoed back to me, a haunting confirmation of what I had unleashed. And with that, the shadows whispered their final truth. You will never be alone. As darkness engulfed my mind completely, my last fleeting thought screamed in silence. How could I have unleashed the very horrors I'd sought to unearth?